Well, hey again, it's Tom Jordan, and it is Thursday, September the 19th, 47 days until Election Day, believe it or not. And we're going to get into the U.S. Senate race in a moment, and we're going to speak with senatorial candidate Mike Rogers in this fourth edition of Tom Jordan Live. That's coming up in just a few. But it's also just 9 days after the ABC News debate, when there were many opportunities to fact check Kamala Harris, seeing that the debate moderators were in a fact-checking mood on Donald Trump. You'd think they would have done the same thing for Kamala Harris. But no worries about that, because people who are in the direct target sometimes of some of her mischaracterizations are providing the fact-checking evidence themselves. So there's this video. Maybe you've already seen it, maybe not, but these combat members of the U.S. military sitting in a war zone, American military, watching the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris is trying to paint this false picture of how safe the United States is from foreign wars and threats, thanks to her and Joe Biden, when obviously the opposite is true. The United States is right now engaged in multiple foreign conflicts around the world. So Kamala Harris said, without being fact-checked, that there isn't a single U.S. military member in a combat zone right now. And check this out.
As of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world. The first time this century. What? But let's understand.
So where the are we right now?
Right. So they're sitting there in a war zone watching the debate, and she's, they're fact checking her in real time. At least they were providing the fact check. So, a few days after this, Senator Tom Cotton, sharply criticizing ABC News for its handling of, Vice President Kamala Harris's misleading comment, among many others, during the, last week's debate. 9 days ago it was, and accusing the network of aligning with the Democratic Party and the Kamala Harris campaign. Watch this.
I don't know where those two moderators were fact-checking Kamala Harris with that lie, as with so many of her other lies. I guess they were busy wrongly fact-checking President Trump. Kamala Harris's claims that there are no American troops in a war zone, I bet would come as a surprise to the thousands of troops we still have in places like Iraq and Syria. They're getting repeatedly hit by mortars and drones and other attacks by Iranian-backed terrorists because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have appeased and emboldened the Ayatollahs for 4 years. It would probably come as a surprise to all of the sailors we have in the Red Sea who are facing the constant threat of missile attacks from rebels and outlaws in Yemen that, again, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have turned a blind eye to, that they took off the terrorist list in their first days in office after Donald Trump had put them on the list, that just this morning fired a ballistic missile into Israel. Kamala Harris's lie about American troops not facing danger in war zones around the world is just one more example of why she's a weak, failed San Francisco liberal who is not up to the job of being our commander-in-chief.
Yeah, I would agree with that with Senator Tom Cotton, because she's not, and she's clearly trying to gaslight the American public, and it's an offense to members of the military. In the same debate, she was criticizing Donald Trump's critique of members of the military, but she's pretending they're not in harm's way. And Tom Cotton brought up a very good point there, that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they have allowed now Iran to bring in tens of billions of dollars because they got rid of these, terrorists and these sanctions against Iran, which has now allowed them to continue and exponentially provide more funding to these proxies and these terrorist organizations that are right now attacking Americans in these now battle zones, war zones, whatever you want to call it. So now these military experts, they've also rejected Kamala Harris's statement, pointing out the presence of U.S. troops in conflict zones like in Syria and in Iraq, where American forces continue to face these drone and these missile threats and the attack. Representative Jim Banks, he's a Republican out of Indiana. He added to the criticism, sharing some recent footage of U.S. soldiers coming under fire, which, of course, further disproves Kamala Harris's claim. So Tom Cotton emphasized the seriousness of that error, claiming it just reflects, in large part, the administration's failure to handle these military threats, particularly from the country of Iran. Remember, whose stated goal is to get rid of Israel and then get rid of the United States. the little Satan, the big Satan. ABC News has not responded yet to the mounting criticism of that debate. So I bring up Tom Cotton because he just joined my guest who's coming up, Mike Rogers, a U.S. Senate candidate on the campaign trail, which I will get into in just a moment. And by the way, the Senate is something we should be watching very closely in this election because the battle for control of the U.S. Senate in 2024 is incredibly important. It's crucial. With many of these key races around the country, especially in states like Michigan, Arizona, Montana, and Ohio, really determining the direction of the next administration's policies. Democrats face pretty tough odds defending their slim majority in the Senate, and with several toss-up races, Republicans are poised right now to challenge in this election for control of the U.S. Senate. They already have the House. So control of the Senate in 2024, it will significantly impact the next president's ability to implement their agenda, and it's something I'm going to ask Mike Rogers about as well. Let's say he wins and Kamala Harris wins. How does he plan to work with her or maybe disrupt some of her far-left progressive policies? So Democrats currently hold a narrow 51 to 49 majority, but with 34 seats up for grabs, that balance is at serious risk for the Democrats. So you got 5 key Senate races, but for now I'll talk about these 4: Arizona, Montana, Nevada, and Ohio. They are rated as the toss-ups where either party could really win those races. In West Virginia, of course, Senator Joe Manchin's retirement almost guarantees a Republican will win in that deeply red state, putting Democrats on the defensive there in West Virginia. In Nevada, the incumbent there, Democrat Jackie Rosen, is up against Republican veteran Sam Brown in a race which is complicated by Nevada's slow recovery from COVID, and now its status as a swing state. So that's an important state as well for the U.S. Senate. Montana's longtime Democratic Senator John Tester facing really tough competition from former Navy SEAL Tim Sheehy in a state that Trump has won twice. So John Tester is now kind of pulling back from Joe Biden and trying to seem more moderate as a Democrat in that state. So we got Ohio as well. Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is pretty vulnerable. He's facing the businessman there, Bernie Moreno, in a state where Trump has also won twice. And then there's Arizona, the Senate race there. It'll see Democrat Ruben Gallego take on Republican Kari Lake in a state that has become a key battleground in recent years. Arizona, by the way, used to be a very strong Republican stronghold, a red state. But in recent years, more people moving out of California. And, of course, Arizona borders the state of California. So it's become a wee bit more liberal in the state of Arizona, especially in that major metropolitan area of Phoenix, Arizona. The outcome of these Senate races could really hinge on the presidential election as well. As you notice in times past and pretty much throughout history, these Senate races often align with how a state is going to vote for president of the United States. So the national Republicans are working hard to avoid the flawed candidates they kind of fielded back in 2022 in the midterms, while Democrats in these swing states are now trying to distance themselves, as I mentioned about John Tester in Montana, from Joe Biden to appeal more to these independent voters. So with the Senate control at stake, Republicans really are in this prime position to challenge this Democratic majority that has used its pretty slim power to push policies that have literally led to economic uncertainty. The retirement of Joe Manchin, as I mentioned, that all but ensures that a Republican pickup in West Virginia, signaling that Democrats are losing the ground, even in states where they pretty much held sway for many, many years. Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Ohio, these Democratic incumbents in traditionally red or swing states are really, really struggling to maintain voter confidence in a really challenging political landscape because voters now are seeing what's happening. Sherrod Brown and John Tester, they've pretty much benefited from Democratic waves in years past, but in this post-Trump era that we find ourselves in, they can no longer align with the establishment of the Democratic Party because that could be their undoing. So the national Republicans, they've, I think, learned from the mistakes in 2022. And they're really trying to focus on the real strong candidates like Tim Sheehy in Montana and Kari Lake in Arizona, setting the stage for a much more competitive race. Critical because if the Republicans get the House and the Senate, regardless of who becomes president, they'll be able to at least push back on some of these far left policies that were allowed to pass under Joe Biden. Jackie Rosen in this Nevada Senate race is pretty much on the defense now, and the states, again, the post-COVID recovery there, it's really a sign of failed Democratic leadership in times of crisis. And if in all these states that have been Democrat run, if people just remember what it was like during COVID and what they were told they had to do and what they weren't allowed to do, and these unilateral decisions seeming like, reminiscent of dictators of countries past, the Republicans really do have a pretty strong opportunity in a number of these Democratic states. So, which race have I not mentioned yet? Purposely, because we're going to speak to one of the candidates there. It's the state of Michigan. And I've saved, I think, one of the more interesting races for last, so we can delve into this a bit more. Why have I done this? Because when I look at this race and these two different candidates, it's really a race between two individuals who could not be more different from one another. One who positions herself as a moderate, but is as far left as you can pretty much be, as maybe aside from a Rashida Tlaib or an Ilhan Omar or a Kamala Harris. But she is close to that. And it's a member of Congress, currently in Congress, Elissa Slotkin, has voted 100% with a Biden and the Kamala Harris administration. You can look at these various issues. Take illegal immigration, for example. Elissa Slotkin, she allowed the legalization of what were previously illegal immigration practices. So she has consistently voted against border security measures, including like restarting the border wall construction. She didn't want that. She has failed to crack down on illegal immigration as a whole and has supported it. And she voted against H.R. 1 in the House, which would have solved the border crisis by probably 80 to 90%. That's probably what experts say would have stemmed the flow of illegal immigration into this country. Some say 90%. That alone would have done that. Votes like hers have left Michigan communities vulnerable to crime, to drug trafficking, the slow erosion of legal immigration processes. She voted against a border security measure that would have limited the asylum eligibility to ports of entry. And so by opposing these restrictions on where asylum claims can be made, Elissa Slotkin has allowed migrants to bypass those legal ports of entries, and it creates chaos at the border. And it overloads an already strained immigration system, making it harder to manage the legitimate asylum cases, which there might be about 10% of all who claim asylum. About 90% of them do not qualify. So those people are still out in this country. And they'll get a court date sometime, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years from right now to maybe adjudicate their case at that time, which time, who knows if they'll ever be found. So again, the Build Back Better Act, she voted in favor of that, which was described as the largest mass legalization program for undocumented immigrants. For Mike Rogers, what's his positions on the border? So he supports reinstating the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policies to control the illegal immigration by reinstating Remain in Mexico, and the United States could prioritize the legal immigration process, which would prevent illegal immigrants from overwhelming the system entirely. And right now, the ones who do get across are not penalized, and it just causes a lot of chaos at the border. Mike Rogers has stated, we'll talk a little bit about this as well, that his priority is tracking down criminal gang members and those affiliated with terrorist organizations at the border. I'm going to ask him about, how many terrorists does he believe are in the country right now as a result of maybe 10 or 15 million illegal immigrants who have come across. We have to have a really defined approach to illegal immigration and just implement the policies. I mean, there's laws in the books right now. All right, that's that. Let's take the issue of abortion. Elissa Slotkin supports really no restrictions, at least none that I have heard or seen from her. She's the one who colluded with Google to prevent pregnancy resource centers to be allowed in these Google searches. She wanted them to be excluded from Google searches. Only abortion centers could pop up. So if you search for, unplanned pregnancy on Google, for example, Planned Parenthood, is at the top of the list, and that's how she liked it, followed by an array of abortion options. Health information about the dangers of having a baby which was unplanned. Options for abortions post Roe v. Wade and things of that nature are popping up on Google. If you search for unplanned pregnancy, take a look, try it yourself. Elissa Slotkin says the pregnancy resource centers are dangerous. What are pregnancy resource centers? Well, they're the ones who provide other alternatives to abortion, like, motherhood support services, financial support, adoption services, counseling, free clothing, free diapers, free baby formula, etc., all that kind of stuff. That's Elissa Slotkin's take. She supports a federal law that makes abortion accessible with no restrictions, the last I checked. So she would like a federal law. Basically, that goes beyond Roe v. Wade. Mike Rogers has simply said, it's pretty simple to him, it's up to the states. Voters of each state should decide this issue of abortion. He's left it there, but he's certainly pro-life, with exceptions for the safety of the mother and instances of rape and those things alike. I'm going to talk to Mike Rogers about the foreign threats that exist right now. What's Elissa Slotkin's take? She does tout her CIA analyst credentials. She had a career in the CIA. She kind of frames herself as an expert in overseas conflict and her intelligence expertise. But here's the thing. She has supported, and I apologize for my cough this morning. I got something stuck in my throat. But Elissa Slotkin has supported this Chinese Communist Party submitted corporation, a company called Goshen, to build its massive factory to build EV batteries in her state. It'll directly benefit China, which the directors of the National Intelligence, the FBI, Homeland Security, and the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee says is a major threat to national security. And she signed a non-disclosure agreement in order to receive inside information and briefings about this company without having to reveal those findings to her constituents. I'm going to talk to Mike Rogers about that. Should any member of Congress be signing an NDA with any organization to prevent the constituents of that representative from revealing those things to the people she represents? As for Mike Rogers on this issue, he is the aforementioned chair of the House Intelligence Committee and says the use of taxpayer dollars to fund a Chinese company with ties to the CCP is not only reckless, but it is a clear threat to American sovereignty and security, because China now has the world's largest navy. They got like 355 ships at sea in their navy. That's more than the United States, and it poses a direct threat to, the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. And China's dominance in these rare earth minerals to build the EVs, it means it can dictate the global supply of these critical materials for a whole slew of emerging technologies like, advanced batteries that we're talking about, which hinders America's ability to innovate and remain competitive around the world in these very key industries such as energy and defense. It's not just electric vehicles. What about the economy in this particular race? And by the way, this is indicative of how many other candidates in these other states feel as well. They kind of align along these various policy positions and their ideologies. So Elissa Slotkin voted for the American Rescue Plan and the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which both directly led to skyrocketing inflation. We saw 9% inflation in the summer of 2021, and she voted for continued spending, these bills to exacerbate the issue itself. Mike Rogers wants to continue what he did while in the House of Representatives. He worked to eliminate federal taxes on education and these health savings accounts, get rid of the taxes there. He also slashed about $7.5 billion in what was described as totally wasteful government spending, just in the area that he was responsible for, $7.5 billion. And he believes these government subsidies and the wasteful government spending is precisely what leads to a higher cost of living and inflation. And then there's energy. It has a direct impact on the economy as well. Mike Rogers has said highlights the vast energy resources available in the United States, and accessing those resources is key to lowering cost for families. So the polls here in this race are quite it shows Slotkin is ahead. Not by much, but it's still, in my view, it's kind of a toss-up. The latest poll, this was from Mears, Michigan news source, has Slotkin up on Rogers by 3 points. That's at 48 to 45. That came out on September the 11th. So, yeah, 48 to 45 in that particular poll. There's a CBS News poll that came out earlier this month that had Slotkin up by 7 points in this race. And the Real Clear Politics average right now has her up by about 5 points. It's 47.5 to 42.5%. Both candidates have their support systems. Senator Tom Cotton was just out with Mike Rogers on the campaign trail and has joined Donald Trump as well. Mike Rogers has on a number of occasions, and Michigan and elsewhere, and has his support there as well. Elissa Slotkin has support from the likes of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Debbie Stabenow, the current holder of that seat in the U.S. Senate. So because Mike Rogers is barnstorming the state, we set up a recorded conversation when he had a few moments to talk about the race that he is currently in, the policies he supports, and how he perceives his opponent's views and her plans for the United States. Here's that conversation right now. Mike Rogers joins us, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in the great state of Michigan. Mike, it's good to see you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Tom, it's great to see you. Love the new digs.
Yes, it's nice. We like it as well. First week out on the new program here. I want to ask you about, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to ask you about this because, Donald Trump, he comes to Michigan a lot. I know you meet with him on a regular basis every time he comes out here and in other venues as well. And there was this second assassination attempt on his life earlier this week. And then a couple days later, he's on the campaign trail once again, coming to the state of Michigan. Many trips to your state. But this time is a bit different because this is one of the first now appearances since that latest assassination attempt. I'm noticing a pattern here is got to be concerning to you. And what do you think is leading to now these seemingly more and more regular attacks, particularly against Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, first of all, the Democrats need to dial back their rhetoric. It's dangerous. He is a danger to the country. He's a danger to democracy. That's all nonsense, and it's inflammatory, and it gets people whizzed up. And that's why I think people have lost their minds and are showing up trying to assassinate the former president. And then you lay that over with an absolute collapse of competence by the Secret Service. And we have a terrible mix of something really bad going to happen. So I give him credit. He gets right back on the road. He doesn't he does not want them to make him hide under the desk. He's not one to do that anyway. And so it's good that he's back. It's good that he's talking about the issues important to Michigan. And we're delighted he chose Michigan to come back. And he's got 2 visits. He's got his vice president on the west side, and he's kind of in that I call it the work belt part of Michigan there, that center part, Flint, right around Flint.
Yeah, exactly. So it's great they're coming here. Michigan is a critical state. We know that's the case. One more note on this, because on the violence, the political violence that seems to be occurring, because I remember your successor in the House of Representatives, Mike Bishop. He was shot at in 2017, and I spoke to him moments after the shooting. He got on the phone with me, and we talked with him about 20 minutes. And it was the same, venue, that congressional baseball game practice. Steve Scalise was shot by a deranged person, an individual who was a Democrat, and he hated Republicans, and he decided to take it out with gunfire. Do you have any thoughts on what is? I know you mentioned Democrats in the rhetoric that's going out here, but what role do you think the media plays in this? Because even after this latest attempt on Trump, the media narrative, Lester Holt with NBC News and other folks out there as well, are doubling down on this language that is not true, that Donald Trump, and by extension, I would think they're claiming his followers, are somehow a danger to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, and that rhetoric is what is incredibly dangerous, and the media is complicit. And it's not just Lester Holt; it's the whole shebang of them talking in ways that amplify emotions and anger when they say things like he's a danger to democracy. So if you're a little bit delusional, you think somebody's telling you go defend democracy if you go and pick up a firearm and shoot at the former president. Really dangerous. And they can stop this. They should stop it. The problem is They can't talk about border security. They can't talk about the cost of groceries. They can't talk about the cost of energy. So what they do is say, well, he's going to take your democracy. That's what he's going to do. And they've been saying it now for a year. It's not, this isn't new. They knew they were in trouble. And that's why all of the Democrats are making up all kinds of nonsense, including me and others, that have nothing to do with the truth and everything to do with their failed policies. And that rhetoric needs to stop because it's dangerous.
It does. So let's talk about some of these issues that, in my view, are dangerous to our freedoms and just basically the right to live in a way that we see fit, just to survive. You received the endorsement, which was great, by what's known as AgriPAC. This is this important body that represents farmers in the state of Michigan, the Michigan Farm Bureau's Political Action Committee. And I was at the Michigan Farm Bureau's offices in Lansing about 2 months ago, and there was this real palpable feel there of concern that they haven't dealt with in many, many years because of some certain considerations regarding overregulation and the cost that is increasing in order to run a farm. The margins for farmers are pretty slim as it is. And I think there seems to be some concern about what's happening in this country. It might be going the way of what we saw in other countries, like the Netherlands, for example. The climate activism leading to the shutting down of farms because it might be actually dangerous to the planet Earth. What is the reality in terms of farming in your state, in the state of Michigan, and really when you look at the whole of the country? What is this push now to make it seemingly more difficult for us to just have access to our food supply?
Yeah, so think of this. This is the Democrats are fond of talking about firsts, Tom, but this is the first time in our history that we've imported more food than we've exported. And when you talk about the challenges that the federal government has shoved down the throats of Michigan farmers, they are feeling the pinch. And just since the Democrats kind of took over in the Senate doing the Farm Bill, and our Senator Debbie Stabenow has been the chair of that committee, there's been 140,000 family farms across the United States closed, gone. Some of them bought by corporate farms. I mean, we have about 45,000 family farms in Michigan. The pressure on them because of this regulatory environment, because energy prices are so high, it's just outrageous. They're having a hard time making it. And so this was an important statement. They have not endorsed a Republican in this Senate seat for 18 years. And so this was a big, important step for them because they understand they can't take the increase in taxes. The Democrats want to increase estate taxes, which doesn't allow farmers to give their kids their farm or their grandkids their farm. They know that the new tax regime is going to put them out of business. Markets, they're not enforcing, the Democrats are not enforcing market rules for importation. And it's literally going to take out, I'll give you a great example, our cherry farmers. The market, they being Turkey and China, dumping cherries in Brazil. They're bringing them into the United States. Brazil doesn't grow one cherry, by the way. So all of these cherries being imported they sprinkle some water on it, say it's processed in America, and our farmers in Michigan can't compete. They're arguing, you keep this up in 3 years, you won't have a cherry from Michigan. You'll be eating Chinese cherries. And so, they need the administration to do what it's supposed to do. They don't seem like they can get anything done, Tom. That's why we're so honored to stand with farmers. And I can't wait to get back and work on their behalf to get the government out of the way and let them grow food for our country.
Yeah, we need them. I mean, the farmers obviously are crucial to the longevity of our nation. We're going to starve without them. China is one of these countries that seems to be buying up farmland amongst many other things that they're doing in various countries around the world, but, particularly in the United States. And I had a crazy conversation with the current energy secretary, or she came on my former employer's station and talk about energy and how great this rapid transition to renewable energy is going to be because it's going to make us more independent from China because we'll have more access to these rare minerals like cobalt and all. And everything she was saying was absolutely false. The reverse was true. And right now we know, and you know this more than most, that China right now has expanded its influence over these critical minerals that are necessary for us to have these mandated electric vehicles in Michigan and around the country and these rare earth elements. I think more than 60% of rare earth mining is under Chinese control and influence. 85% of the processing controlled, the mining is controlled by Beijing as well. What is the reality? If we do go down this road of a full transition to electric vehicles and all renewable energies, well, what will that do to the national sovereignty of the United States, and will it, as Jennifer Granholm claims, make us more independent of China?
No, I mean, this makes us far more dependent on China. Matter of fact, I argue if they're successful, you better start learning Mandarin. They are just that the fact that they would look in the mirror and say, this isn't happening. I don't know if you have any Star Wars fans out there on your program, but this is that scene where they say, these are not, me too, these are not the droids you are looking
Right.
for.
Obi-Wan
I mean,
Kenobi.
they just boldly look at you and lie to us. So that 85% is that critical minerals, which means every single electric vehicle that we build in the United States, 85% of it has to go through China. How does that make us more independent from China? Here's the second part. All of this mandatory wind and solar minimum requirement percentages means your energy rates are going up. I just read an article today. Look for a 58% increase in your energy costs over the next couple of years. 58%. Because you know what? Wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. And guess what? Now we're getting rid of even our natural gas distribution. That means less power goes out, less power, more demand. I mean, this is economics 101, people. The costs are going way up. And that's because of electrification. It's because of AI, because that uses a huge power suck. It's cryptocurrency, huge power suck. And so you start thinking this through and think, I don't know what, and the scary part is they may actually believe it. I'd rather hopefully they're just lying to us. I hope they don't really believe this, because this is really dangerous.
No, I don't think they believe it at all. I think they know full well what they're doing here. And I think it's part of a larger effort to delegitimize the United States or make us less powerful, to make us more, acquiesce to our, foreign neighbors' demand to make them more powerful. And just, I don't know if it's a global effort, what it is or not. And I don't understand a lot of things. One of the things I don't understand is your challenger in this race, or your competitor, how you want to call it, Elissa Slotkin. I've interviewed her for years, and I've been astounded at the things that she has stated that turned out to be demonstrably false, but so well covered up by a cooperating media in her state of Michigan. And she's a rising star in the Democratic Party. But one of those things she said to us was that she in no way would ever sign a non-disclosure agreement with a company called Goshen, which is a Chinese company which has been setting up shop and planning with the help of, Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the Democrats in the legislature to build a battery factory in Michigan where they would be essentially making huge profits with subsidies coming from the state as well. And the accusation against Elissa Slotkin was that she had signed this non-disclosure agreement, so she knew all the things that was happening in there. She said that's demonstrably false. That's not true. Well, the reality is she did sign a non-disclosure agreement. We have her signature, and it was with what's known as the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Council, whatever it is, MEDC. That gives her all access to all the deals Michigan is making with Goshen and these other companies that no one else has access to. So she was dishonest, at least the very best, disingenuous in that claim that she would never sign an NDA, but she has. What does that tell you about what Elissa Slotkin might know about this company that is basically under the thumb and under the control of the Chinese Communist Party? What might she know, and what is she not revealing to her constituents?
Yeah, and first of all, what is any elected official doing signing an NDA? That's just a terrible idea. You shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't participate in it. Why? Because there's about $1 billion, I say, in cash and prizes of our taxpayer money going to a Chinese company that's going to bring Chinese engineers, who the former CIA director under Barack Obama said absolutely they will use to commit acts of espionage into our state. And they've subsidized it so much that they're in the market of stealing other manufacturing jobs from these small little companies around Michigan that build little, they manufacture to a smaller degree. And guess what? They're getting outbid because the Chinese got subsidies from the U.S. government on the backs of these Michigan workers. I've never seen anything like it. So the reason she signs it is she doesn't want to talk about the fact that she knew that this was a Chinese Communist Party company that was going to receive money. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Matter of fact, the incorporation papers state it. So she didn't want to have to explain it. Now she just says, well, I can't talk about it because there was an NDA, so I can't really talk about it. But she said the same thing. Oh, that wasn't really for that. I mean, if you think about the deception she's given us just on this deal, she said she would not go to Congress, and she's been there for 6 years and voted on 100% of the Biden-Harris agenda, 100%. She said, I wouldn't vote for EV mandates. She went back there and voted for EV mandates. Told you, I did not sign an NDA related to any money, cash and prizes, 1.7 or 175 million and about 800 million in tax credits. I would never sign an NDA for that. We have the paper showing that she signed the NDA for that. When you just go down the list, the deception is unbelievable, and it's followed up. You mentioned it. The Secretary of Energy came here. It used to be the governor of Michigan, and said, no, this will make us less dependent on China. I mean, you start getting a little worried that they are lying, and as aggressively lying as they are. There's not a kernel in truth in that. That's just the opposite.
Yeah.
We can't even get a nickel mine in Michigan approved, and it takes an average of 29 years to get it approved, and you need nickel for electrification.
Right.
Right. I mean, they're working against our interests, both on the critical mineral side, on the supply chain side, and now they're going to tell you to buy a car that has to be processed at least 85% of it in China.
Okay, so is this a foregone conclusion that, this is going to happen, that we are going to be forced via mandate or whatever it is, that we are as a nation going to have to accelerate this transition to renewable energies? Or if you get in office and others like you, is there a way to back out of this?
Yes, there is. And I will guarantee you, I will get up every day. And I'll tell you why. I worked in a car factory, Tom. These are important jobs, really important jobs. Take care of families, allow them to have a good life, allow them to have maybe even a cabin up north, or go fishing up north, or, go kind of do the things we do here in Michigan. Yeah. So they're worth fighting for. It's 40% less labor on an EV, 40. So we have 1.1 million jobs tied to building internal combustion engines here, which have gotten a lot more efficient, by the way, over time, and less emissions. And so you're just take the straight calculation, 40% of those jobs go away. That's 400,000 manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan alone. What will that do to our economy? What will that do to the value of your house? What will it do to the value of your business you just invested in? I mean, this is really bad. And they're not talking about that second or third order effect. They're just hoping people don't pay attention. No, this is good for you. I'm with the government, and I'm here to help you. My Lord, we need a lot less.
To quote Ronald Reagan. Yeah, it's very concerning, and I don't know how many more lies they can tell before Americans start to realize, okay, these things are just not adding up. But I'm glad to know that it's not a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen. But it is surprising to me that the UAW would endorse a Democratic candidate for president when they know full well that their policies will lead to fewer jobs in manufacturing and in the automobile industry. I want to talk about illegal immigration because I moved to Michigan many years ago from a border city, and I saw in real time what illegal immigration did to my childhood, my teen years, and to my young adult life. It decimated the educational system in California. It drastically increased the cost of living. Healthcare was going by the wayside because the cost of healthcare was so rampant. Much of the country was unaware of some of the ramifications that illegal immigration would have on a community and on a household, and inflation and all those various aspects, crime and the like. Well, now in Michigan, we're effectively become much like the city I grew up in, with the amount of illegal immigrants coming here and other, flyover states around the country. Elissa Slotkin, I know she voted for that Build Back Better Act, which actually was the largest mass legalization for undocumented immigrants in this country. There are maybe 25 million illegal immigrants now in the United States, probably twice, maybe three times what it was just 3.5 years ago. Is there something we can do to reverse this? I know that you support Remain in Mexico, and that stops it at the border. But what do we do with all the people that are here right now who might pose a real, existential threat to this country?
Well, we do have people here that will and are posing a threat. Not only the Venezuelan gang, that gang is dangerous by its notion. And by the way, you have certain tattoos in this gang, and you get those tattoos by committing violent offenses in Venezuela. Well, when they're coming across the border and you see that tattoo, in the FBI, we would call that a clue. That's a pretty good idea. Probably not to let that person in. They're not going to do good things when they get here. Well, they let them in the droves, and some were part of the gotaways that never got registered. Others, they just caught them and released them. And so what I would do is get the FBI out of, I don't know what it's doing these days, but refocus the FBI to its purpose of finding and getting rid of these people who are posing real threats in our community. The FBI admitted there's at least 8 that they know of. ISIS-K, and ISIS-K is the nastiest form of the terrorist organization. They were kind of a spin-off of Al-Qaeda, and they got the K name it's called Quran, I think it's called, where these Al-Qaeda members said, okay, we're not really Al-Qaeda anymore, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we're going to go over here to Khorasan, that's what it's called. And so they've reformulated themselves, now part of ISIS. We know there's 8 of them here. These are hardened Al-Qaeda trained, combat trained, terrorist trained people in the United States. And those are the ones we know about, but they don't know where they are. And so we have got huge challenges, not only the criminal side, but that. And I would use the FBI and every law enforcement agency to find them and deport them. You cannot let them stay here. And it's not for up to us to house them and feed them 3 meals a day in prison. That should go back to the country that let them out and let them here. And it's going to take an effort, but that's where I'd start. If we don't get a handle on this, you will lose these communities forever. I mean, really hard to get them back once they're criminally overridden. Good people move out. The people who get trapped there lose hope. I mean, this is going to be a huge problem.
Yeah. You mentioned the FBI, and I know that you were just joined by Senator Tom Cotton. He was in Michigan with you, and you were talking with people together, and you were discussing some issues, and he did as well while he was in the state speaking with media outlets. And one of the things he talked about was the FBI, that if Donald Trump gets elected, he should get rid of Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, because of what has become of an organization, which I know you love and care about because you were an FBI agent as well earlier in your career. But there has seemed to have been a weaponization of the Department of Justice in general against certain citizens in this country, and that would include the FBI. Do you agree with Tom Cotton that something has to change and something is truly amiss within the Federal Bureau and investigations?
Yes, and also Department of Justice lawyers. They're about 10 deep political now. It never used to be that way when I was in. You had career prosecutors who stayed there who were committed to enforcement of the law. The FBI was the same. Now you have about 10 deep at Department of Justice that is, I think, way too political. And they're influencing the FBI, and the FBI, under, Christopher Wray is just saying, yes, sir, 2 bags full. That never would have happened when I was an agent. And I worked organized crime. I worked real cases, bombings and murders and human trafficking cases and drug cases and fugitive case, all the things that you want the FBI to be out there, keeping America safe. They have seemed to so lost their way on all of this. And I do believe it's this combination of leadership in Washington, D.C. at the Bureau and the Department of Justice lawyers. And Wray was kind of a technocrat lawyer at the Department of Justice. They made him over. The FBI doesn't need that. It needs leadership. And otherwise, if you don't have that leadership, what happens is you have analysts, not FBI agents, but analysts saying you ought to start cases on Catholics. Catholics. And it wasn't just one example. They said, oh, no, that only happened one time. Come to find out, it happened like 3 times. I mean, they all have to go, and you have to reset that culture back to what the FBI was intended purpose is. It's a great institution, but it is so tarred. And I will tell you, I speak with the Former Agents Association every once in a while. And they are disgusted at what they see happening. This is not their FBI. It's not the agency that they gave their lives to, many of them, for 20 and 30 years. And they're equally disgusted. So the good news is there's a lot of momentum to get it right, but we have to be in charge for that to happen.
It's amazing to me because you have Merrick Garland came out the other day and said there's no such thing happening here, kind of what you described with Obi-Wan Kenobi saying these are not the droids you're looking for. And yet we see these things, and we know now that there has been targeting of just average American citizens who may have posted something on Facebook that they didn't like, and they're getting knocks on their door from the FBI, or FBI agents show up at these, pro-life advocates who are now being, open the door with a gun pointed in their face. And you're right; those things did not used to happen. But if the top guy, I mean, there's Christopher Wray, then there's a step above him, right? There's the Department of Justice. If that guy at the very top says none of this is occurring, is there any sense of hope that this ever will be resolved or addressed in the manner that it should be?
Not with the current administration. No, absolutely not. Not with Garland there either. It's not going to happen. I think he passionately believes it. And that's what worries me again. I think they've got it in their head that they're the only defenders of the Constitution. And in order to do that, they have to go after conservatives. We saw this even with the IRS, where
Yes.
they were going after people who were shopping at Cabela's,
Yes.
right? Because they must be some kind of terrible person for shopping at Cabela's. And I love it, by the way. Those are great places. I love to shop.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
I
so
think people who are reading the Bible, I think if they're shopping for a Bible, they were targeted as well. Those kind of conservatives are somehow a danger to democracy. Let's say this happens. Let's throw out a scenario there, and I'll let you go because I know you're really busy. Let's say you win, and I hope you do. I really do, and I think you will, actually. And Kamala Harris becomes president. So it's Kamala Harris, and you got Mike Rogers, and hopefully Tom Barrett wins his seat as well, which was your former seat prior, right? That was what he's
Yes.
running for. So we're going for him as well. How will you work with an administration that just seems so, like you said, these things can't be fixed so long as this current administration stays in place? Well, Kamala Harris would be the same administration as a Joe Biden administration. Are your hands tied in that point, or what can you do?
So you have a lot of tools. I'll just give you this quick story here. So when I was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, when I first got on the committee, the intelligence agencies had this kind of attitude that they didn't have to necessarily cooperate very much. And the good news is, a former FBI guy, you're not blowing smoke up my pant leg. And so what I would do is say, listen, no is just a long and painful way to yes. I will cause every problem for you along the way. So you have levers that you can flip that do cause them pain. And it makes their lives, the leadership, not the agent, not the people doing the real work, but the leadership makes their lives a little miserable. In the Senate, I'm hoping to access more of those levers to say, listen, I want to work with you. If you want to help get this better, I'm going to help you get it better. At the end of the day, I want it to work. So this isn't me just coming in saying you're awful and you're always going to be awful. It's me coming in saying, we're going to get this fixed. You're either going to be a part of getting it fixed, or you're going to have a long and painful road to yes. And I'll make it a long and painful road to yes, because that's the kind of leverage you can have in the legislature if you're not in the administration. And so there's lots of ways to do it. They need money to survive. Guess what? Congress controls money. That's the one and best way to do this. That's why it was important for me as chairman to actually do a budget every year. I told everybody that was chairman back when I was there, you're not really a chairman unless you do a budget, because that's the only way you can do oversight. And there's a lot of committees, sorry to say, don't do their budget authorizations every year. My argument is they should, and it's a bit lazy not to do it. And they're hard; they're not fun. I mean, you're arguing over, gas allocations for covert operations sometimes in the middle of the night. Doesn't seem all that sexy, but it was important work. And what it allowed us to do is get them back under understanding that we are the oversight body and we will conduct oversight. I want you to be successful, number one. But at the end of the day, I will perform oversight, and you will do it by the Constitution, you'll do it by the law, and you'll do it by our oversight. I got there, and after a while, we didn't even have to have those conversations. I would call up and say, I need X. Guess what? I got X. They
Yeah,
didn't.
that
They
no
didn't.
became a yes
Yeah,
pretty
exactly.
fast.
Immediately a yes. That
Yeah.
long and
Well,
painful part of the way.
that's how it's supposed to be done. And I certainly hope you get in. And people can go to rogersforsenate.com. Rogersforsenate.com. There's a whole slew of information. If you want to get to know Mike Rogers a little bit better, you'll be better off for it. Mike Rogers, candidate for Senate, Republican candidate in the great state of Michigan. It's good to talk to you again, Mike. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. There's a lot of guys and gals like him that are running for Senate, so we'll be watching all of those races. As again, the election just 47 days away from today, so we'll have continuing coverage here on Ton Jordan Live. And by the way, we're planning a special election night coverage as well. More information to come on that. By the way, I mentioned earlier Elissa Slotkin, the opponent of Mike Rogers in this U.S. Senate race in Michigan, in her collaboration with Google on the abortion and the pregnancy center issue. Well, it looks like Google is up to some other types of interference when we talk about election interference right now in this the current election cycle. The Federalist discovered this. I found this on the Federalist.com about Google's voter registration efforts, specifically linking users to Democracy Works. That's an organization that's funded by left-leaning foundations. So it notes that, Google on National Voter Registration Day displayed a link encouraging Americans to register to vote, which redirected users to information provided by the far-left liberal group called Democracy Works. So here are some key points that were raised in this article. I'll read these to you. The type of funding that Democracy Works has. The article in the Federalist says that the Democracy Works is funded by these left-leaning foundations such as the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and Open Society Foundations. You probably heard of that. That's associated with the prominent Democrat donors, including George Soros. The Open Society Foundations. The tech involvement in this. Democracy Work partners with tech giants like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, though through its Turbo Vote initiative, which helps voter registration efforts at colleges and at corporations as well. More of a left-leaning way to get some information about it. There's some privacy concerns in all of this as well with Democracy Works. Google has made a defense here. They say that, Google asserts that there is no partisanship involved in using Democracy Works, which is described as a nonpartisan organization, and that it provides this voter information sourced directly from, state election offices. It's transparency and trust in the big tech type of thing. But Google's decision to link to Democracy Works raises, I think, some legitimate questions about transparency for a company that controls so much of the information that we access. They should be more forthcoming about the partisan leanings of the organizations they promote. So that was some of the latest stuff about some of the left-wing donors and the issue there with the Democracy Works and how they're the tech bias in the election processes and some of the misinformation about election security. And the other issue is really about the dark money and the dark money's role in these nonpartisan organizations, because you can label yourself as nonpartisan but still be heavily favored towards the left and leftist candidates. So when this organization like Democracy Works claims to be nonpartisan, like they say it is, and they receive money from left-leaning billionaires, what do you think is going to happen? If their source of income and revenue is coming from these leftists like George Soros, do you think that has any influence on the way they steer people to registration for voting? So these well-oiled machines and all these different aspects and the influence on electoral votes and all those issues are at play. So Google, if you see something, if you search for something about election information or how to vote, there's a pretty good chance they will steer you towards the Democracy Works organization, which will maybe not give you the full story. You always want to have informed consent, right? Well, that's something that Google is not always completely well known for. So that's the deal with them. There's some other information I want to get to today as we're going to finish out here this fourth edition of Tom Jordan Live. There's another claim that Elissa Slotkin has made against Mike Rogers, that he is beholden to Big Pharma. because he wants more control over how Medicare negotiates the drug prices. And she's claiming that means he's, beholden to, big pharmaceutical giants. Well, Slotkin has a bit of a double standard here. The Michigan Democratic Senate candidate is attacking, of course, Mike Rogers for accepting donations from the pharmaceutical industry. But she has been taking in quietly about $90,000 from these pharmaceutical-backed fundraising organizations, these PACs herself, and that's quite a contradiction. She's not revealing that in her advertisements. So pharma PAC contributions, let's take a look at this. Slotkin has accepted donations from 5 leadership PACs that in total received nearly $500,000 from pharmaceutical and medical companies. And if she's slamming Rogers for the same kind of funding, what does it say about her own campaign's ethics if she's really against that? Her attacks on Mike Rogers, and she did some of the similar stuff in her previous contest when she was running for House. She had 3 election contests, and it started with Mike Bishop back then. She made some claims about him which were not true, and then it was, I think, Paul Young for that same seat, and then the latest was Tom Barrett, who right now is running again for that seat, but that's the seat that now Elissa Slotkin is vacating to run for the Senate seat. But some of the pharmaceutical companies, the giants that have been funding these organizations that are funding Elissa Slotkin, include companies like Amgen, AbbVie, Eli Lilly. There's a Chris Coons connection here as well. Slotkin took about $25,000 from the Blue Hen Federal PAC, and that is led by Senator Chris Coons. And not surprisingly, the PAC also rakes in substantial donations from pharmaceutical giants. So painting Mike Rogers as cozy with drug companies while she's benefiting from the very same system is a bit hypocritical as well. Also want to mention something that you may have heard about this, maybe read about this as well, but the Teamsters Union, this is an incredibly interesting story because historically the Teamsters, they have come out and they've endorsed the Democratic candidates for president. Well, this is a pretty historic move because the Teamsters, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, announced that they're not going to endorse any candidate in the 2024 presidential race. And this marks really the first time in nearly 30 years that this union has refrained from supporting a Democrat. The union has historically leaned left politically since about 1996. That was the election, I believe, with Bill Clinton and Bob Dole. They supported, I believe, Bob Dole in that election. But union members are now shifting to Donald Trump. It's almost 60% of the members within Teamsters are supporting Donald Trump because they believe Donald Trump and his policies are better for manufacturing and in the long term better for their jobs. That'll give them more longevity in the manufacturing industry in these various union jobs. And so it's a dramatic shift in support amongst the Teamsters members from President Joe Biden to Donald Trump after Biden left the race under Biden. Because at that time, a lot of the members did support Joe Biden, but when he left, they did not want Kamala Harris to be elected president. So it's 59.6% support among the union members for Donald Trump. And what is it? It's just about, I think it's 34% for Kamala Harris, a significant decline for the Democrat. Also, one thing to note regarding that, and I want to say this because the criteria, from my understanding, for the Teamsters to endorse a candidate for president, if they were going to endorse Kamala Harris, they needed to have at least 50% support amongst union members for Kamala Harris. They didn't get that. What was the criteria to give an endorsement for Donald Trump? They needed to have a 100% endorsement rate from the members. This is how I understand it. In order to endorse Donald Trump, it was like unanimous support. That was the difference in my understanding of how the Teamsters was going to make an endorsement. Well, they got about 60% for Donald Trump, so they decided, well, we're not, the leadership, that is, decided not to make the endorsement of neither candidate, which is telling in and of itself. Of course, why don't you do what the members in your organization want you to do? Because the leadership, maybe they don't want to acquiesce to the conservative ideology and perspectives of their own membership. Anyway, interesting. Thought that was a nice tidbit to share with you. I want to thank you for paying attention to me today, this 4th edition of Tom Jordan Live. We will, of course, be back tomorrow, streaming live at 9 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook. We're available on X, Instagram, Patreon as well as Tom Jordan Live. We love your support if you're able to. It's just a little bit to help things out. If not, that's fine. Keep watching. Keep taking in the information. We're learning about all sorts of things together. And by the way, if you missed the stream, we are available in perpetuity, we'd like to think, on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course back on YouTube and all your streaming devices. We're there throughout the remainder of the day as well. It's Tom Jordan. I want to thank you for your time today. God bless you. Have a fantastic day.